My neighbor spent 7 years filing complaints on every house on our street and told me at a block party that he just enjoyed making people answer for themselves, so the whole street made sure his phone never stopped ringing for the next 10 months. For 7 years, my neighbor Roger filed complaints against every house on our street, not occasionally, not when something was actually wrong, as a hobby. He was 63, retired from some county clerk job, and the only thing left in his life was the warm feeling of dialing a non-emergency line on people who had committed offenses like owning a basketball hoop or putting their recycling bin out one day too early. The family 2 doors down got a complaint about their grass being 2 inches too long. The young couple across the street got reported for parking on the wrong side of their own driveway. The single mom on the corner with the disabled son got a complaint that her son's wheelchair ramp wasn't permit compliant, which it was, and which she had to spend a Saturday afternoon proving to a code officer who was visibly more annoyed with the complainer than the homeowner. The retired teacher at the end of the block got reported for the height of her decorative hedge. Roger reported a Halloween yard display at a house with 3 young kids for being too gruesome for a residential area. He called the cops on a wedding reception at the corner house because the music was on at 9:45 p.m. on a Saturday. The husband from that house came over to apologize, and Roger refused to open the door, just yelled through it that next time he was going straight to 911. There wasn't a single friend he'd made on the street in all those years. He didn't try. When my wife and I moved in, he came over within 48 hours to inform us that our front yard tree was encroaching on the sidewalk by approximately 7 inches and would need to be trimmed. We thought he was joking. He wasn't. A printed diagram showed up in our mailbox the next morning. The line that did it, the one I won't forget, came at a block party we threw last summer. We didn't invite him. He came anyway, walked through our open gate uninvited, helped himself to a hot dog, and stood next to me at the grill. I was being polite because I'd never had a direct fight with him personally and figured I could keep civility going. He told me, around a mouthful of bun, that he'd reported 6 houses on the street already that year. I asked why. He gave me a small private smile, the kind a man gives at a joke only he gets, and said, "I just enjoy it. I like making people answer for themselves." Then he wandered off to get another hot dog. I stood at the grill with the tongs and decided, I'm not a vengeful person. I've never even left a bad restaurant review. But I went home that night and looked up his phone number in the HOA directory, which he himself had bullied the association into making mandatory years before. It was on page 2. I copied it onto a sticky note and didn't do anything with it for a week. The note just sat next to my keys. The first call I made on a Tuesday morning was a fake, confused, wrong number call. I asked for a man named Jerry, then checked the number again, apologized, hung up, and called back 15 minutes later asking for Jerry again. By the 4th time, Roger was screaming. That was Tuesday. By Friday, I told my wife. By the following Tuesday, she'd told 2 of the women on the street. By the end of the month, there were 8 of us. The single mom with the disabled son was in. The retired teacher was in. The family with the lawn complaint, who'd been fined $300 while on vacation and hadn't had time to contest it, was in. The young couple from the wedding house were the most enthusiastic because they were still angry, and you don't forget the cops showing up to your wedding. There was no group chat. The unspoken rule was that everyone did 1 or 2 things a week and nobody told anyone what they were doing. That way Roger could never figure out where the next thing was coming from. The young couple signed him up for every catalog and mailing list they could find on the internet. Mattress samples, denture cream coupons, a year's subscription to a magazine called Modern Cat Fancier that came in a plastic sleeve and got thicker every month. The retired teacher had a granddaughter who knew her way around a computer, and within 2 months Roger was getting so many robocalls he had to give up answering his landline altogether. The single mom started calling code enforcement on him from a burner phone she bought at a gas station for $19, a trash bin 1 inch too far from the curb, a hose left out overnight, a bird feeder technically too close to the property line. The lawn fine family got creative. Locksmiths at 7 a.m., carpet cleaners at noon, a bouncy castle once, which he had to argue his way out of paying for, a tree trimming crew, which felt particularly fitting. I kept it simple. Pizza orders mostly, rotated through chains, always in his name, always cash on delivery, always late at night. He paid for the first few. Then he just stopped answering his door, and the boxes started piling up on the porch. Stray cats started coming. The single mom started leaving cans of tuna near his property line. That's when Roger called the cops and told them he was being targeted by a harassment ring. His words. I know because the officers repeated them back to me later with the kind of tone you use when you're reading something off a report that you don't fully believe. 2 officers showed up on our street in the middle of a Wednesday afternoon, and I watched the whole thing from my living room window. Roger met them on his front lawn like he'd been waiting and walked them up and down the block like a tour guide at the world's most boring museum. He pointed at houses. He gestured at mailboxes. He stopped in front of the single mom's place and talked for a full 2 minutes while one of the officers wrote something in a notebook, and the other stood there with his hands on his belt looking like he wanted to be literally anywhere else. Viola came up beside me at the window, still holding a dish towel. "Do you think he knows it's us?" she asked. I shook my head. "He doesn't know anything. He just knows he's uncomfortable for the first time in 7 years." Eventually, the officers made their way to our door. One of them asked if I had noticed any unusual activity directed at a neighbor. I kept a straight face. "Unusual how?" I said. "Like someone calling code enforcement on a wheelchair ramp?" The officer stopped writing. He looked at his partner. His partner looked back at him. There was a pause that said more than either of them probably meant it to. Then the first officer closed his notebook and said, "We've actually had a conversation with the gentleman about his complaint history. There's a file." They didn't ask me for a statement. They didn't ask to come inside. They just thanked me and walked back to their car. I watched them drive past Roger's house without stopping. Roger was standing on his porch watching them leave, and even from across the street I could see the look on his face. He'd called in his big guns, and his big guns had driven away. So Roger did what Roger always does. He went back to what he knew. Within 72 hours, he filed 14 new complaints against houses on the street. 14 in 3 days. The retired teacher got cited for a cracked section of sidewalk in front of her house that had been there for 20 years. The lawn fine family got reported for a non-permitted structure in their backyard. The structure was a children's playhouse. It was maybe 4 feet tall and painted bright yellow with a little plastic slide on one side. Their daughter was 5. The single mom got another complaint about her son's ramp. The exact same complaint she had already fought and won. Same wording, same supposed violation, like Roger had photocopied his own complaint and just changed the date. Then I got my letter. Code enforcement. My front yard tree. The same 7 inches of sidewalk encroachment. Recycled and resubmitted like he had a template saved on his computer. I sat down at the dining table and held the letter flat on the surface with both hands. Viola came in, saw my face, pulled out the chair across from me, and sat down. He's not stopping, she said. He's speeding up. She was right. He couldn't figure out who was behind the campaign, so he was punishing everyone. Every house, every family. He was doing the only thing he knew how to do. I called Connor the next morning. He was a friend who worked in local government, not in code enforcement, but close enough to understand how the system worked from the inside. I asked if there was any limit to how many complaints one person could file. He was quiet for a second. Technically no, he said, but there's something called a vexatious complainant designation. If code enforcement gets enough pushback, they can flag him. But someone would have to formally request a review, and you'd need documented proof of a pattern. Other homeowners would have to co-sign. I looked at the letter still sitting on the dining table. Documented proof of a pattern. 7 years of complaints against every house on the street. 14 new ones in 72 hours. A wheelchair ramp reported twice. A 5-year-old's playhouse. A hedge. A Halloween display. A wedding. A tree, and it's 7 inches. If that wasn't a pattern, I didn't know what was. The next Saturday morning, I grabbed a notebook from the junk drawer and started walking door to door with one question. How many complaints has Roger filed against you? The retired teacher opened the door, saw the notebook in my hand, and invited me inside before I got 3 words out. She led me to a little desk in her living room, the old wooden kind with a roll top that she probably graded papers on for 40 years, and pulled open the bottom drawer. Inside was a manila folder that landed on the table with a thud that surprised both of us. Letters, notices, citations, carbon copies of responses she'd written, photographs she'd taken of her own property after each complaint, dated on the back in pencil. 7 years of documentation, organized by date, every single one tied back to Roger. She smoothed the top page with her hand and looked at me. I've been waiting for someone to ask. 9 complaints, not a single confirmed violation. 9 times she'd been dragged into the system. 9 times she'd been cleared. 9 times Roger had faced 0 consequences for putting her through it. When I left, my notebook was already half full. The single mom let me in through the side door because her son was doing homework in the front room. She had the paperwork from both wheelchair ramp complaints laid out on the counter, and I read the inspector's handwritten notes standing right there at the counter. Complaint without merit, no violation found. Clear as day. The second complaint was word for word identical to the first. Same form, same language, same box checked, different date. Then she reached into a drawer next to the fridge and pulled out a letter. Not from code enforcement, from Roger, directly, written on plain white paper. In it, he told her that her son's ramp was an eyesore that drags down property values, and suggested she consider alternatives that are less visible from the street. She watched me read it and then said quietly, I never showed anyone this. I didn't want my son to know. Her voice was steady, but her jaw was tight, and I could tell she'd been carrying that letter around for a long time. I photographed it with my phone, both sides. Over the next few days, I hit every house on the block that had been involved. The Lawn Fine family had their citation and the photos of their daughter's playhouse. The young couple had a copy of the noise complaint and the police report from their reception. Everyone had something. Everyone had kept it. It was like the whole street had been holding onto their receipts for years, waiting for a reason to pull them out. A woman named Brielle reached out, someone I knew from my gym who used to rent on our street about 3 years back. Roger had filed a complaint about her dog barking during the day while she was at work. The complaint went through, and she got hit with a $200 fine. Her landlord nearly kicked her out over it. She eventually just moved to get away from the whole situation. I moved because of that man, she said. I want to help. She had a formal statement emailed to me by that evening. By the end of the week, I had 6 households, statements covering 7 years, and a 91% frivolous complaint rate. I brought it all to Connor, and he went through the whole pile page by page. When he finished, he leaned back and let out a long breath. This is more than enough, he said. But I want to warn you. If you file for the vexatious designation, Roger's going to know someone organized that. He's going to come after whoever's name is on the request. I knew that. I thought about the retired teacher and her folder, the single mom and the letter she hid in a drawer so her son wouldn't read it. Brielle, who moved out of her own home because of one man's complaint. These people had trusted me with their stories. They'd opened their doors and their drawers and their files because I asked. Put my name on it, I said. Connor nodded slowly and said he'd get the paperwork started. I drove home with the folder on the passenger seat. Viola found out that night. I set the folder on the counter and told her I'd filed the request with my name on it. She didn't yell. She just went quiet in that way she does when she's running the math on what something could cost us. Then she said, he's going to make our lives miserable. I leaned against the counter next to her. He already has. He's made everyone's lives miserable. The difference is now there's a paper trail. She reached out and straightened the folder so the edges lined up with the counter edge, which is something she does when she's nervous and needs her hands to move. Then she said, then we better be ready for whatever he does next. 2 weeks went by. The review was processing somewhere in the system and Roger had no idea it existed. The pranks had slowed down on their own without anyone needing to say anything about it. The street felt different, quieter, but not in a tense way. More like the exhale after you've been holding your breath for a long time. I mowed my lawn on a Saturday morning, took my time with it, did the edges with the trimmer, and when I was done, I stood in the driveway drinking water from a bottle, and the retired teacher walked by with her little rolling cart. She gave me a thumbs up without a word, which was all she needed to give. Down the block, the kids from the Lawn Fine family were riding bikes in the cul-de-sac, and their dad was sitting in a folding chair watching them. The single mom's son was on the porch with a book. Nobody was talking about Roger. It was the first time since we moved in that I could stand outside my own house and not feel like I was waiting for the next complaint to arrive. Then Sunday morning happened. I was making coffee, still in my t-shirt and sweatpants, and the doorbell rang at 8:30. I opened the door and Roger was standing on my porch. He was calm. He'd showered, his hair was combed, and he was wearing a collared shirt tucked into his pants like he was going to a job interview. Under his left arm was a white 3-ring binder, the thick kind with the clear plastic sleeve on the front. He looked at me the way someone looks when they've rehearsed what they're about to say and they're ready to deliver it. I know what you've been doing, he said. His voice was level, almost pleasant. All of you. And I've documented everything. He opened the binder and flipped through it slowly. Time-stamped photographs of delivery trucks parked in front of his house. Screenshots of catalog subscriptions showing his name attached to accounts he never created. A log of robocalls, handwritten in neat block letters, with the time each call came in and how long it lasted. Photos of the tuna cans near his property line with a ruler laid next to them for scale, like he was documenting evidence at a crime scene. He flipped to the last section, which had labeled tabs, then closed it and tucked it back under his arm. I've already spoken to a lawyer. He tells me this qualifies as coordinated harassment. I can name 8 households. I can prove a pattern. He let that sit for a second. He watched my face like he was looking for a crack. I didn't give him one. But I'm not unreasonable. You make it stop, all of it, and I don't file. You keep going, and I take this to court. Every single one of you. He turned around, walked down my porch steps, crossed the street, and went back into his house. The whole thing took maybe 3 minutes. Viola had heard all of it from the hallway. He's bluffing, right? She said. I watched Roger's front door close. I don't think he is, I said. That night I thought about the single mom who could not afford a lawyer, the retired teacher on a fixed income, the young couple who had just bought their first home and were probably still paying off the wedding itself. Roger didn't need to win a lawsuit. He just needed to file one. The cost of defending yourself is the punishment, and he'd been using the same trick with code enforcement for 7 years. I called Connor and told him about the binder and the ultimatum. I asked how fast the review could be completed. Could be another month, he said. We might not have a month. Roger's threatening to sue the whole street. He went quiet. Then he said, there's a public hearing option. If enough homeowners show up to the next code enforcement board meeting and testify, the board can expedite the review. But it means going on the record, publicly, in front of Roger. That was a big ask. Standing up in a room with fluorescent lights and plastic chairs and saying out loud, to a board of strangers, what this man had done to you, with Roger sitting right there and his lawyer writing things down. But it was also the fastest path to the only thing that could actually protect the people on my street. When's the next meeting? I asked. Thursday, Connor said. Thursday night I walked into the municipal building with the folder under my arm. I expected maybe 2 or 3 people from the street. I figured most would say they supported me and then find a reason not to show. I walked through the door and counted 11 people from my street sitting in those plastic chairs. The retired teacher was in the front row with her manila folder on her lap, sitting straight like she was waiting for a school assembly to start. The single mom was a few seats over, her sister next to her keeping an eye on her son, who was reading a book and didn't seem to care where he was. The young couple from the wedding house were near the middle, sitting close together. The Lawn Fine family was there, both parents, no kids. And then I saw Brielle in one of the side seats, the woman who hadn't lived on our street in 3 years, who drove 20 minutes on a Thursday night to sit in a plastic chair in a government building because a man she'd never have to see again had once cost her $200 and nearly her home. Viola was in the second row. She looked at me when I walked in and gave me a small nod, the kind that means I'm here and that's all you need to know. Roger was in the back row with his binder and a man in a suit sitting next to him. He scanned the room, and I watched something move behind his eyes. It wasn't fear, it was surprise. He didn't expect this many people. I kept my statement simple. 47 documented complaints over 7 years, 4 confirmed violations, 91% frivolous rate. I placed the folder on the table and sat down. The retired teacher went first during public comment. She stood slowly and said, I've lived in my home for 31 years. I've received 9 complaints from the same man. Not one resulted in an actual violation. I'm 74 years old and I've spent more time in this building defending my hedge than I ever spent in a principal's office in 40 years of teaching. A few people in the room laughed quietly, the soft kind that comes from recognition more than humor. The single mom stood and said, he complained about my son's wheelchair ramp, twice. The ramp that lets my son get in and out of his own house. I have a letter from this man telling me my son's ramp is an eyesore. She handed the letter to the board. The room went very still. The wife from the young couple told the board about the police showing up to their wedding at 9:45 on a Saturday night. My grandmother was there. She thought someone had been hurt. She started crying. I will never forget that. Then Roger stood and presented his binder. Organized, detailed, laid out like a legal brief, point by point with dates and evidence. He said, these people are not victims. They are conspiring against a private citizen for exercising his legal right to file complaints. The board chair looked at our folder, then at Roger's binder, then at Roger. Sir, he said, you have filed 47 complaints in 7 years against your neighbors. 43 were found to have no violation. You complained about a child's wheelchair ramp, twice. You called police to a wedding. Whatever your neighbors may have done in response, this board's concern is whether you have abused the complaint system. And based on what I'm seeing tonight, the answer is yes. The board voted unanimously to designate Roger as a vexatious complainant. His future complaints would require pre-screening by an inspector before any action could be taken. The designation went into the public record. Roger's lawyer put a hand on his arm. Roger pulled away. He stood